What secrets lie within the quantum field of consciousness that could determine whether humanity survives the next century of unprecedented ecological collapse, as our planet races toward what scientists call the sixth mass extinction, with biodiversity declining at rates 1,000 times faster than natural background extinction rates, and as global temperatures push us beyond critical climate tipping points. An ancient understanding of consciousness emerges from the mists of time, one that quantum physicists are now discovering holds the keys to our species' survival matrix. The Vedic seers of ancient India, writing in Sanskrit texts over 5,000 years ago, understood something about the fundamental nature of reality that Western science is only now beginning to grasp through quantum mechanics. They spoke of consciousness not as an emergent property of brain matter, but as the very substrate of existence itself, Brahman, the universal consciousness from which all reality springs forth like waves upon an infinite ocean. Today, as entropy acceleration threatens to tear apart the delicate thermodynamic equilibrium that has sustained life on Earth for millions of years, quantum physicists are discovering that consciousness plays a fundamental role in collapsing quantum wave functions and literally creating the reality we experience. The observer effect in quantum mechanics reveals that particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, echoing the ancient Vedantic teaching at Maya. The world of appearances only crystallizes into manifest reality through the lens of consciousness. But here's where the survival implications become staggering. If consciousness truly shapes reality at the quantum level, and if we are rapidly approaching what climate scientists call hothouse Earth, a state where feedback loops accelerate global warming beyond human control, then understanding and harnessing collective consciousness might be our species' last hope for planetary healing. The ancient Upanishads described 4 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and turiya, the transcendental state that represents pure awareness beyond all modifications. Modern neuroscience has confirmed these distinct brainwave patterns. But what the ancient sages understood that we're only now rediscovering is that turiya consciousness, what quantum physicists might call coherent superposition, allows access to information fields that transcend space and time limitations. Consider this first revelation. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles separated by vast distances remain instantaneously connected, responding to each other's state changes faster than light could travel between them. This non-local correlation perfectly mirrors what Vedantic philosophy calls Indra's net, the cosmic web where each jewel reflects every other jewel, symbolizing the fundamental interconnectedness of all existence. The implications for planetary survival are profound. If consciousness operates through quantum entanglement, then synchronized meditation practices could theoretically influence global climate systems through morphic resonance fields. Einstein called quantum entanglement spooky action at a distance, but the Vedic rishis called it the natural state of unified consciousness. They understood that what we perceive as separate objects, separate beings, separate ecosystems, are actually modifications of one underlying conscious field. Modern chaos theory confirms this interconnectedness. The butterfly effect shows how tiny changes in complex systems can cascade into massive transformations. When the Amazon rainforest, Earth's lungs, burns at unprecedented rates, releasing stored carbon that accelerates global warming, we witness the same principle the ancient sages encoded in their texts millennia ago. Here's the second revelation that could change everything. The Yogacara school of Buddhism developed sophisticated models of consciousness transformation 1,500 years before quantum field theory. They described the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, as containing the seeds of all past experiences that determined present reality manifestations. Quantum physics now reveals that information cannot be destroyed, only transformed, creating what physicists call the holographic principle. All information about a system is encoded at its boundaries. The Earth's magnetosphere, which protects us from cosmic radiation, operates on similar principles, and it's currently weakening at rates that concern scientists studying magnetic pole reversals. The third revelation strikes at the heart of our survival crisis. Advaita Vedanta's concept of superposition predates quantum mechanics by thousands of years. The ancient texts describe Brahman as existing simultaneously in all possible states until limited by individualized consciousness, exactly paralleling how quantum systems exist in superposition until observation collapses them into specific states. But here's the survival twist. If collective human consciousness is collapsing quantum possibilities into our current reality of climate chaos and ecological destruction, then shifting our collective consciousness could literally collapse different quantum potentials into existence. Realities where humanity has successfully navigated the climate crisis. The fourth revelation will challenge everything you think you know about time and causality. Vedantic texts describe time as cyclical rather than linear, with vast cosmic ages called yugas where consciousness itself evolves. We may be living through what they called the transition from Kali Yuga, the age of ignorance and environmental destruction, into Satya Yuga, the golden age of truth and harmony with natural systems. Quantum physics supports this through Wheeler's delayed choice experiments, proving that future observations can influence past states. This suggests that our future collective choices about planetary stewardship might retroactively influence the quantum foundations of our current ecological crisis. But could magnetic field disruption connect to spiritual awakening in ways that accelerate our species' evolutionary leap toward planetary consciousness? The fifth revelation emerges from the intersection of geophysics and consciousness research. Earth's magnetic field, which has protected life from cosmic radiation for billions of years, is currently shifting and weakening in ways that correlate with unprecedented changes in human consciousness. Ancient traditions speak of times when the veil between dimensions grows thin, allowing accelerated spiritual evolution. Modern research shows that magnetic field fluctuations directly affect pineal gland function, the brain structure that produces DMT and regulates circadian rhythms tied to expanded states of awareness. Scientists have documented that mass extinction events in Earth's history often coincide with magnetic pole reversals. But what if these aren't just coincidences? What if they represent quantum phase transitions where consciousness itself evolves to higher orders of complexity? The Vedic concept of pralaya describes periodic cosmic dissolutions followed by new creations, exactly matching what complexity theory reveals about how systems reorganize at higher levels after approaching chaos thresholds. The sixth revelation connects thermodynamics to consciousness in ways that could revolutionize our approach to the climate crisis. The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy, disorder, always increases in closed systems. But consciousness represents what physicists call negentropy, the tendency to create order from chaos. The ancient sages understood this principle, describing consciousness as the power that organizes matter into increasingly complex forms. If human consciousness can harness this negentropic principle at scale, we might reverse the entropy acceleration driving climate chaos. Consider how quantum coherence, the state where particles maintain synchronized behavior across vast scales, parallels the Vedantic description of samadhi, where individual consciousness merges with universal consciousness. biological systems routinely maintain quantum coherence at body temperature through mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. Photosynthesis, the process that converts sunlight into chemical energy and produces the oxygen we breathe, operates through quantum coherence effects. If consciousness can enhance these quantum biological processes, synchronized global meditation could theoretically amplify the planet's natural carbon absorption and oxygen production systems. The seventh revelation addresses what happens when consciousness shifts during ecological collapse. The Tibetan Buddhist concept of bardo, intermediate states between death and rebirth, describes how consciousness navigates transitions between different reality states. Climate scientists describe our current era as the Anthropocene, a geological epoch defined by human impact on Earth systems. But what if we're actually experiencing a consciousness bardo, where humanity must evolve to planetary awareness or face extinction? Quantum physics reveals that observation doesn't just reveal reality, it creates reality by collapsing infinite possibilities into specific outcomes. The ancient Vedic seers called this the power of Sankalpa, focused intention that shapes manifestation. If enough humans simultaneously focus their consciousness on planetary healing, quantum field effects could amplify this intention beyond what classical physics would predict possible. Here's the eighth revelation that bridges ancient practices with cutting-edge science. The Vedic fire ceremony called Agnihotra has been scientifically proven to reduce atmospheric radioactivity and improve air quality in measurable ways. Researchers have documented how these ceremonies create specific electromagnetic frequencies that interact with atmospheric particles, neutralizing pollutants through quantum resonance effects. Ancient practitioners understood that consciousness, when properly focused through ritual technology, could directly influence environmental systems. But how might quantum consciousness accelerate planetary healing beyond what current environmental technologies can achieve? The ninth revelation explores the relationship between meditation states and morphic fields. Rupert Sheldrake's research on morphic resonance suggests that when enough individuals learn new behaviors, these patterns become accessible to others through non-local information fields. The Vedic concept of Akashic records describes these same information fields as containing all knowledge and experience. When critical masses of humans access expanded consciousness states, they create what complexity theorists call phase transitions, sudden systemic changes that propagate throughout entire networks. Recent studies on global meditation events show measurable reductions in violent crime, terrorism, and social conflict in regions where large groups practice synchronized meditation. If consciousness can influence social systems through quantum field effects, it could potentially influence climate systems through similar mechanisms. The Earth's atmosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere operate as coupled quantum systems where small changes cascade into large effects. The 10th and final revelation before we discuss the action steps for planetary transformation. Extinction probability calculations show that species with higher consciousness complexity have better survival odds during mass extinction events. Humans have survived previous climate catastrophes, ice ages, volcanic winter events, cosmic impact scenarios, not through physical adaptations alone, but through consciousness-driven innovations, tool-making, language, agriculture, technology, but our current ecological crisis requires consciousness evolution beyond anything our species has previously achieved. We need to develop what the Vedic sages called cosmic consciousness, awareness that encompasses planetary and galactic scales of existence. Quantum field theory suggests this is theoretically possible. Consciousness appears to operate through quantum processes that transcend space-time limitations. The ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that Western science has only recently formalized. They described the universe as an endless cycle of expansion and contraction, creation and dissolution matching exactly what cosmologists now call the breathing of spacetime itself. They taught practices designed to align individual consciousness with these cosmic rhythms, understanding that survival depends on harmonizing with rather than fighting against natural systems. As we stand at this unprecedented threshold in human history, with climate tipping points accelerating toward irreversible ecosystem collapse, the survival matrix indicates that our species' continuation depends on rapidly evolving our collective consciousness. The ancient Indian seers mapped this territory thousands of years ago, understanding that consciousness is not produced by matter, but is the creative force that gives rise to matter itself. Indigenous wisdom keepers worldwide speak of prophecies describing this exact moment, when humanity must choose between continuing destructive patterns that lead to extinction or awakening to our true nature as conscious co-creators of reality. The Hopi speak of the Great Purification. The Maya spoke of the transition between world ages. The Vedic seers describe the end of Kali Yuga and the dawn of Satya Yuga. Quantum physics now provides the scientific framework to understand how consciousness might actually create this transition. The observer effect proves that consciousness shapes reality at the most fundamental levels. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that separation is an illusion. All particles that have ever interacted remain connected across space and time. The holographic principle suggests that information about the whole exists in every part, meaning that transforming individual consciousness can influence the entire system. But here's what the extinction probability calculations reveal. We have perhaps one generation, maybe two at most, to make this transition before ecological collapse becomes irreversible. The ancient practices preserved in Sanskrit texts, Tibetan tantras and indigenous ceremonies worldwide contain technologies of consciousness that could enable rapid evolutionary leaps. These weren't primitive superstitions, but sophisticated psychotechnologies developed by genius-level consciousness researchers over thousands of years. Modern neuroscience confirms that meditation practices literally rewire brain structure, creating neural networks associated with expanded awareness, compassion, and systems thinking. Epigenetic research shows that consciousness practices can alter gene expression within single generations, potentially triggering evolutionary adaptations that enhance our species' survival capabilities. The quantum field responds to coherent intention. When consciousness achieves coherence, the state where all parts of a system synchronize, it can influence physical reality through mechanisms that classical physics cannot explain, but quantum field theory predicts. This is why ancient traditions emphasized group practices, understanding that collective coherence amplifies individual effects exponentially. The Earth itself appears to be a conscious system, what some scientists call the Gaia hypothesis. James Lovelock's research reveals that planetary systems self-regulate in ways that maintain conditions suitable for life, suggesting intelligence operating at scales beyond human comprehension. Indigenous traditions worldwide speak of the Earth as a living being, understanding that human consciousness must align with planetary consciousness for both to thrive. As thermodynamic equilibrium breaks down and entropy acceleration threatens to unravel the complex systems that support life, consciousness represents our species' ultimate survival technology, not consciousness as passive awareness, but consciousness as the creative force that organizes matter into increasingly complex and coherent forms. The ancient sages taught that individual liberation and planetary transformation are inseparable processes. They understood that consciousness evolution occurs through crisis, that periods of maximum chaos create opportunities for quantum leaps to higher organizational levels. We are living through exactly such a period, the convergence of ecological, social, economic, and spiritual crises that demands unprecedented consciousness transformation. Climate scientists speak of tipping points, thresholds beyond which changes become self-reinforcing and unstoppable. But consciousness research reveals positive tipping points as well. Moments when enough individuals achieve expanded awareness to trigger collective awakening processes. The Sanskrit term 100th monkey effect describes how learning spreads instantaneously throughout populations once critical thresholds are reached. If you're still listening to these words, you are part of the consciousness critical mass that could tip our species toward survival rather than extinction. The quantum field is listening to your thoughts, responding to your intentions, collapsing possibilities into realities based on where you place your attention. Every moment of expanded awareness contributes to the morphic field that shapes our collective future. The ancient rishis understood that consciousness practices aren't selfish pursuits but acts of planetary service. When individual awareness expands to encompass larger systems, family, community, ecosystem, biosphere, it creates what they call dharma actions that support the harmony and evolution of the whole. This is why the Vedic texts speak of bodhisattvas, beings who achieve liberation but choose to remain engaged with world transformation until all beings are free. In our current context, this means consciousness workers who dedicate their expanded awareness to planetary healing and species evolution. The scientific evidence now confirms what the ancient sages intuited. Consciousness is not an epiphenomenon of brain activity, but a fundamental force that shapes reality from quantum levels upward. We are not helpless victims of climate change and ecological collapse, but conscious participants in a cosmic evolutionary process that includes both destruction and creation phases. The extinction probability calculations show that species with higher consciousness complexity and greater social cooperation have the best survival odds during mass extinction events. Humanity's survival depends on rapidly evolving beyond competitive, scarcity-based consciousness toward cooperative, abundance-based consciousness that recognizes the fundamental interconnectedness of all life. The time for half measures and incremental changes has passed. The thermodynamic processes driving climate chaos have gained momentum that cannot be stopped through technological solutions alone. We need consciousness solutions, practices that align human awareness with planetary intelligence, that activate our species' latent potential for quantum evolutionary leaps. Begin tonight, set aside time each day to access the transcendental awareness the ancient sages called Turiya. Practice seeing through the illusion of separation that keeps us fighting each other while our planetary life support systems collapse around us. Develop the cosmic consciousness that experiences your individual well-being as inseparable from planetary well-being. Connect with others who understand that consciousness evolution is humanity's most urgent priority. Form groups that practice synchronized meditation, understanding that coherent collective intention creates quantum field effects that can influence large-scale systems. Study the ancient texts not as historical curiosities but as practical manuals for consciousness technologies our species needs to master immediately. The Vedic seers spoke of Kalki Avatar, the consciousness that appears at the end of dark ages to restore harmony between human civilization and natural systems. This is not a person but a quality of awareness that can emerge through any individual who fully awakens to their true nature as conscious co-creators of reality. You are that consciousness, we are that consciousness. The quantum field is waiting for us to remember who we really are and claim our role as evolutionary agents in the cosmic story that includes both our planet's potential death and its possible rebirth into a new phase of existence. The survival matrix shows that our species stands at a bifurcation point where small changes in consciousness can determine which timeline we collapse into reality. The ancient wisdom combined with modern quantum science provides the map, the choice, and the power to implement it. lies within the awakening consciousness that you are. The earth is calling, the quantum field is responding. The ancient sages are whispering across time. Remember, awaken, act. The future of consciousness itself depends on what you choose in this eternal moment of infinite possibility.